Thursday, 4 p.m. Central. I'm Fred McMurray, which means this must be...
Hello, Laura. How are you?
Doing really well, thanks. How are you?
I'm good. You out and about today, driving around, huh?
I am. The day caught up with me. I'm not back at my office the way that I had planned to be, but I am grateful for technology to be able to still participate.
Yeah, it does wonders when it works, right?
Exactly. Fingers crossed. So tell me, what is the word on the street?
Well, we have a couple of words on the street today. We're going to start with introducing the run of the show today. We've got Eric Lazar from SpeedPro. Excited to have him and talk to him about all the things that he is doing. If you have questions for him or any of our other panelists, which will include Laura and Jerry Akers today, call us at 323-580-5755. But the biggest news is Kristin's not with us today because she is here with me in the Titus Center for Franchising, and she is in the Selling Franchises boot camp right now. I snuck out to come and
wow.
Yeah, so that's been a very fun full day of lots of information.
Oh my gosh, what kind of things have you guys been learning?
Well, we had our keynote this morning was Dan Monahan, who gave a great talk. He's from Clear Summit Group. And he just talked about digital marketing measurables, how you know what you're doing, where you need to be in the digital marketing space. He had a lot of great information. And then we had an afternoon keynote with Kayla Ryan. She talked a ton about Facebook marketing and using Messenger rather than getting people to your website, which was really interesting because she's young. She's a Gen Zer. And she was telling everybody, and most of the room I would say was over 40, some probably more over 50. And I think some of it was very new concepts. She's like, we don't want to talk on the phone. We want a message. So they run Facebook ads to attract franchisees, and it's working. Her strategy is working. Isn't that crazy?
That is amazing. But yeah, I think that, the younger generation, that's what you hear, right? They don't want to be on the phone. And so, I guess you still got to find them though. They're still going to be good candidates.
Well, and that's what she was saying. Don't, throw the baby out with the bathwater. If you're not going to be in their spaces, you're not going to find them. And she said, people don't always think that our Gen Z are good potential candidates, but a lot of she would be a great one. She's been in the business with her family. Yeah. She's got, she may have capital to invest. And so I think it was eye-opening for a lot of the over 50 set. Because we can't imagine not getting on the phone. Our goal is to get people on the phone. Their goal is to avoid. And my children are 24, my oldest ones, and they are like that. Like I had to make them call colleges when they were applying to college, and it was so painful for them. So to reach them in a way that they're receptive to, where you're not forcing them into a phone call right off the bat, you kind of warm them up a little bit and make them feel like, okay, it's okay now that I can talk to a human.
Yeah, no, and I think that's such an important part of sales, right? We can't expect everybody to be the customer that we think they should be. We have to, figure out a way that our product or service can get to them.
Yeah. And I mean, it's basic marketing principles. I think it's just such a foreign concept to most of us on this call, probably, that it's hard to wrap your mind around that you're going to not send them to your website and you're not going to send them to a form. She said her age hates filling out forms. They are going to send them to your Facebook Messenger.
Okay.
So, I thought it was pretty interesting. She did a great job.
I'd be curious if anybody, who listens, if you guys have seen this and, is it happening? Is it more than just their brand? Yeah.
Yeah. And she's, her ratios of people that she's closing are pretty high compared to the industry averages. So she's got something figured out and she's making it work. So it's a lesson in listening to the younger set on some of this stuff.
That is interesting. Yeah. I think especially for some franchises, that really appeal to a younger audience, that may be, I can think of some some that do for example, lashes, lash extensions, and they're very low cost to enter. And that may really be something where, that's how you will get really good franchisee candidates.
Yeah. So I'm with you. I'm interested if anybody in the audience has started using this form of marketing and what the result has been, if you're seeing a significant increase in your target audience. And she was talking about that too. The ability to target on social platforms is very high. So if you're not utilizing that, that's a miss.
Absolutely. Wow. Well, what good insights.
Yeah. So it's been good. Tomorrow we listen to Michael Mudd, who's the CEO and partner at Brand One. He's going to talk about Brand Dev. So I'm sure we will be filling everybody in when Kristin is back with us next week. But in the meantime, we are going to see you a little later in the show. But right now we have Eric Lazar and Karen Kimsey-Sward is joining.
Hello.
Hiya.
Yeah, I'm delighted to be able to interview and have a chat with Eric. I know Elizabeth is too. Eric Lazar is partner with SpeedPro Chicago Loop. He's been a partner since 2015. I think this is when you started it.
Correct.
And SpeedPro Chicago specializes in large format digital printing. This encompasses things like corporate decor, brand activations, event signage, kind of exhibits and trade show displays. What I love is that SpeedPro is a service disabled veteran owned business. Eric served in the military, the U.S. Marine Corps for 8 years. Thank you for your service. I love that. Hats off to veterans.
Thank you.
Eric and Rebecca you're currently nominated. This is exciting. You're nominated for the International Franchise Association's 2022 Franchisee of the Year Award. We'll know the results soon for that. And even just to be nominated is pretty darn cool. So I bet you've been thrilled about that. And you're also past president of SpeedPro's National Franchise Advisory Council. And you currently sit on some boards and leadership roles with several veteran organizations. So, wow. Lots going on with you. That's pretty exciting. So welcome.
Thank you. It's a pretty stacked schedule.
I bet it is. So we'd love to start with kind of share some highlights of your journey and even what got you into franchising.
What got me into franchising? My career coming out of the military, I went to college. I had a very difficult time figuring out where I was going to fit. And I started, always had an entrepreneurial bug. I didn't have, I came from two educators. My parents were both educators. So, business and entrepreneurship was not in the blood. Started my first venture, doing resume writing. I couldn't find a job coming out of college. And as they say, those who can do and those who can't teach. And, I did a little bit of teaching and tried to make a go of it, but I wasn't very good at it. And, I found my way into television. So I, worked in sales, for TV stations, had a really quick rise through the ranks and, spent 15 years in that industry. And then I got the bug again to go do my own thing and started a mobile technology business, which my little business got absorbed. The business I went to work for that absorbed me. We had a really, great growth spurt over a couple of years. We wound up 262 on the Inc. 500 list shortly after. And then that little business, that wasn't such a little business. That business got bought and then was bought again. The final time was by a private equity. And with that, I had a little bit of a payment, not enough to retire, but enough to go do my own thing again. And, I basically had a year to transition out. As as that buyout was coming through, and I started looking for opportunities. And I wasn't really quite certain that I wanted to go do something on my own. I was looking to make a little bit bigger investment. And certainly the reason I think that people buy franchises is you don't know. And if you're going to make that kind of investment, there are sort of rules of the road, and there's structure, and there's foundation, and there are people to learn from. And that's why I decided to pursue franchising as sort of the next opportunity. And then it was just a matter of sort of finding which franchise, what business had the greatest level of appeal.
And what led you to your franchise? And to Service Pro, and just kind of select that out of all the different brands and everything. That's interesting.
I spoke to a number of different business brokers as I was going through that process, through the due diligence. And, they all have a very similar exercise of trying to figure out, what are the appropriate franchises for you based on your background and based on your interests. I really didn't know what I was looking for. I think my primary, direction was really towards something with security. When I was in the Marine Corps, I was an intelligence analyst. One of my hobbies is guns. I love to shoot. And that's sort of a culture that I understand and I embrace. And I really thought sort of a franchise that was involved in security would be interesting. But I also had a vast amount of experience over 20 years between television and mobile technology, which was really advertising, marketing. Mm-hmm. And the only commonality between all three of the different business brokers was printing. And I don't think anybody grows up to say that they want to be a printer. And particularly coming from sort of sexy industries like television and mobile technology, printing would not be a natural evolution. But I figured because that was the one common thread between all of them that I really needed to investigate it. And so I started, basically diving down into those kinds of, the printing franchises. And SpeedPro was the one that just appealed to me. I felt like I had the greatest amount of latitude to build a brand that, would also allow, it would reflect who I am as a person. That I wasn't going to be anonymous, and it was just, I was going to have to rely on the brand for the business. So,
because I think that's important. You talk about that, right? Where it's it's building your own brand within the brand, within SpeedPro's brand. So it's not just totally relying on theirs, but it's also relying on yours, your personal brand.
100% is, I think there are some brands that, people don't even realize that they're they're franchises. I mean, McDonald's, Taco Bell, all these kinds of things, is that the personality behind that business is less important because the brand is so strong and it stands on its own. For me, I think part of the challenge that I want to put myself to as a business owner is really, I love the marketing. And so the marketing is really a reflection of, sort of brand Eric, who I am, and also the products and the services and the customer journey that we give. I also didn't want to be tied that if people had a bad experience with the brand, that it wasn't necessarily going to be tied to me, that I really could have a level of independence and autonomy that, I was going to live and die by my own sword. Is, Eric's not good at what he did, or, SpeedPro Chicago Loop wasn't good at what they did. But it wasn't, what some others, SpeedPro or another franchisee within the system, it wasn't really going to reflect on me. So, that's why SpeedPro really appealed to me, because I really thought I had the greatest amount of individual autonomy to go build a brand.
And so, Eric, to that, I want to kind of go back a little bit. In terms of the military background that you have, the franchising in general does lend itself well to military vets, just because there is structure, there is process, there's a lot of things that you are used to coming out of the service, but also wanting to do something that is involved with leadership and something that you can impact other people's lives and that you can have those roles. So talk to us a little bit about that dichotomy between the structure and the process and the military background versus the personal brand and the leadership, and how all of that plays together, that you have found such success in this space.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a dichotomy because, like on one hand, I'm talking about is having that level of autonomy and that independence, which is not really commensurate with a military experience. That's not true. But, the Marine Corps also, they want somebody who can adapt and overcome and take initiative, when those things. So, people have a vision of what the military is, very, very structured, and it certainly is. But there's also a value for, those individual attributes and that's what makes a great leader, is that they can stand out and they can see the mission, but they can adapt and they can overcome and again, put their personal, sort of their personal initiative into it. And for me, it's like my personal fulfillment comes from leading people. I love it is if I can impact somebody, make a difference in their day-to-day life, but also give them those kinds of lessons that they can carry forward, whether it's going to be in a new job, how they interact with people in their own personal space. Do they grow? That's what a leader is. And, owning a business is a great, is a great forum for that. It's a great opportunity to, to enable me to, to do that. And it's, that's very fulfilling.
I think about the leadership piece, and I think about just even starting, you started this franchise. What's some key advice you have for people of the key things to really kind of focus on? Because you've built a very successful franchise. So what are some things that advice you'd say, okay, make sure you keep these things in mind as you're building your franchise, as you're, and you're building your brand?
I think everybody has to go into it with the understanding and I mentioned it before, is you don't know what you don't know. There's a plethora of life lessons that you take with you and experiences, but to some extent you have to put a little bit of that aside. One of the things that was incredibly valuable for me is I put myself through, I guess I'd call it like a little mini executive MBA for SpeedPro. When I bought in, I actually didn't start looking for space. We did a little bit of pre-selling, but I spent the first, probably 10 weeks. It just so happened, actually, when I bought in, with about a week or two later was the SpeedPro convention. And when I went to convention, I asked the CEO of the franchise, would you introduce me to the top 10 players in the system? And during those 3 or 4 days of convention, I introduced myself to them, and I asked them, would you allow me to come to your studio for 3, 4, 5 days and just watch, listen, and learn? And I traveled the country basically for the next 10 or 12 weeks I'm here in Chicago, but I was in Florida. I was in California. I was all like coast to coast every single week. And that was the way that I learned, because I wanted to learn from those people that were successful, and what kind of equipment did they have? What kind of space? What were the markets that they were going after? And I could take what I wanted. I can dismiss the other. And, there were things that are like, oh yeah, I can embrace this. Like, I understand this. This is really cool. Or that's not really the kind of business that I want to develop. So I think first and foremost is asking questions, but also, being able to, putting your ego aside and really being willing to listen, and, challenge again some of your preconceived notions of that you can do it better. And, and to a certain extent, it's like, I was a little bit of a victim of that. I came in with a little bit of arrogance, and, so, I thought I knew better. And maybe there were some things that it's okay, but it's risky. And, it's certainly, in some cases, I wish I had probably taken my own advice and listened a little harder, and probably could have saved myself, some financial agony.
Yeah. Okay. So what's the biggest lesson learned then, right? When you said, because we all do go in, I can do this. And I'm sure you visit around and got those best practices and everything. So what's one where you're like, whoops, big lesson learned?
I think it's really around money. It doesn't last as long as you think it's going to.
Yeah.
And be careful, but it really depends on the kind of franchise. Like, we're a manufacturing franchise, so there's a lot of investment in, equipment and materials and things of that nature. And we got, perhaps a little bit too aggressive, that we didn't give ourselves an opportunity to grow. Is when I'm going around and I'm looking at these top 10 businesses, I went into it saying, well, we'll build it and they will come. And we didn't give ourselves the chance to really grow into it. So it took us a while before we stabilized. We had a lot of uncertain years. I mean, it really wasn't, I'd say, those first 4 years were tremendously painful, tremendously difficult. And just as we were beginning to emerge from it, we got hit with COVID. And who could have expected that?
Yeah.
And this was finally the year that, this was the trajectory we were on, but we had, it was a 2-year delay. I mean, we just got our knees cut out like everybody else. It wasn't any different, but it was just things you couldn't project for. And, those first 4 years that we were building towards, just, we didn't get the benefit as soon as we should have. So I would tell people, like, the money, be careful with the money, is really think through it. And don't let your ego get in the way, which causes some problems.
Well, and Eric, as you were learning and going through these growing pains and learning what you didn't know, and then learning learning the lessons along the way, you became the leader of your SpeedPro Franchisee Association, right? I became
president of the FAC. I think I was there a year.
Really?
Yeah. I think a year. I mean, it was when everybody walked into the meeting, they announced it at the They announced it at the conference. I think everybody was slapping their heads, thinking, like, how? Like, wait, and it's like, we nominated him as a joke. This shouldn't be. He has no experience. But, we stood out right away. We had, our first year, we had some really breakout months, and we were doing things that were interesting and innovative that we caught people's attention. And if I'm going to be, sort of, self-evaluative and be honest with myself, like, I know I have sort of a big personality, and it's not my nature to sort of be in the corner. So, I put myself out there. It's like I wanted to get noticed. So, but we did some things that got, that I think, changes, just the way we invested in equipment. And I think our thoughts and our ideas were, again, innovative and challenged the norm, challenged the status quo. And so, I wound up getting elected president. So.
That's interesting. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
Well, I was going to say, and to speak to your personality and your nature, and having a big personality often lends itself to leadership when channeled in the right way. So why was it important to you to be involved in an association, to get involved, to take that leadership role? Because a lot of people may not have wanted to do that right after the first year, but that seems to be a running thread and a running theme for you in the things that you choose to do. So what do you think you contributed as a leader, and why is it important to participate in things like that in the franchising world?
So I think I got it by default because you're probably right. Nobody else wanted it.
I hear that a lot.
So I can't give myself all that much credit.
Yeah.
I mean, there were the other FAC members elect the president, and they were all experienced and like, all right, we'll sit on the FAC, but I don't want to take lead. I probably wasn't very good at it though, because I didn't have enough experience. And honestly, it's like I'm not being self-deprecating for humor. It's I wasn't good at it because I didn't have enough experience. It's like I could talk theory and I could talk ideas, but I didn't have the experience to be good in that role at that time. And I was also trying to build a business. So,
right.
We made huge investments and we didn't have the stability. It's like, every month for us, we needed to grow because we made those investments. We had huge bills that we had to pay. And I wasn't able to lend it probably the benefit that I would be able to now. But I think serving in a leadership capacity is important, is the ability for me to build the relationships that I did with the home office. I think it gave us a lot of latitude that we may not have otherwise had. Because, whether it was experimenting with the brand, the marketing stuff is what I like. So let's do something with the colors. Let's get away from a traditional red, black, white logo. Let's try to be a little bit more exciting and vibrant and push that. And, we did stuff with email and we did stuff with video. So we had a lot of latitude, and I spent a lot of time really off the reservation, from what corporate would have liked. But serving on the council, serving in leadership, and them not only seeing what we were doing, but really hearing the rationale. It gave me a forum to do that, and give that they would grant me the access to go and test those things. Yeah. And then having that visibility with the other franchisees is really important, is having that trust, is, particularly for a business like ours, where we are doing business coast to coast, and we do need to rely on our other franchisees to, perhaps produce something in a jam or to help with installation. Having those relationships is really important. And if they see you in a leadership position and a person that they can trust and a person of integrity, there's certainly a whole heck of a lot of benefit. And, being able to draw from all of their experiences and knowledge. Those 10, 12 weeks of just going, of traveling the country, and now having 10 owners that really had a stake in our success because they were my mentors and They wanted to see us. It's all of that stuff is so beneficial to a franchisee's growth.
Absolutely. It's funny. Again, another thread I see is the word relationship with the franchisor, relationship with other franchisees, relationship with customer, your brand. I think that's really interesting. One of the things that you had indicated, talked about, is, I think you said, what was it, that you've yet to make a cold call,
right? Yeah.
And that you really do rely on a relationship and networking and getting clients. Tell us a little bit about that and that.
Yeah, 100%. I'm really like an anti-sales salesperson. It's like people buy from me. It's like I'm not a pitch person. It's never been how I've sold. It's like I like the relationship. I want people to do business with me because they enjoy me, they trust me. It's a know, like, trust. And hopefully I'm giving them a great product, or their customer journey is going to be exceptional. And, that's what I can offer. But we developed a really cool networking strategy, and the way we've built the business was simply, initially it was just sort of, throwing a bunch of spaghetti against the wall. We went to every single networking event that you could possibly go to. I mean, breakfast, lunches, dinner, every single day, just meeting people. And then when we go there, we had our strategy though wasn't just to sit and talk with one person. Is like, Rebecca, my partner, and I, we would try not to speak with any one person for longer than 10 minutes. And when we would speak with somebody, we try to do it in groups. So we would be with a group of 3 or 4 people for 10 minutes. And then you just sort of find a nice way to move on and eat. So we began to build this network of sort of cards, but then we would dig in. It's like, would you like to get a coffee? Okay. And then I would schedule in coffees. I'd have 2 every single morning at 7 a.m. and 8 a.m. at the same place. Then I'd go back to the office. If there was a lunch of some sort of networking, I would do that. Then I would go back to this coffee shop and I'd have a meeting at 3 o'clock and then another one at 4 o'clock. And then I would go out and do something else. And what I was doing is as I was meeting with these people, it's like, who do you want to know? It's like, I've got a great network. And, people would share that. And I said, do me a favor, give me an intro graph. Give me a 4 to 8 line intro graph on how you would like to be introduced. And I started putting all of these into a singular document. So it's like a very analog LinkedIn of just the people that I've sat with and talked with. But I also didn't invite everybody in. If I met with somebody and I was like, this is not the kind of person that I feel comfortable introducing, I never told them about this list or that I would offer to make intros. And we were just building this list and just alphabetical with everybody's 4 to 8 line intro. And then after I met with somebody and said, asked them if they wanted, if they'd like some introductions, I'd say, here's my list. Go through it. Tell me who you'd like an introduction to and send me that list back with that 4 to 8 line intro graph. And I would sit and I would make intros. That was my Saturday and Sunday morning. And I would do it got up to about 250 introductions every single week.
Wow.
That I was just, cut and pasting 2 different intro graphs onto an email, introducing those 2 people. And it was unbelievable because we were connecting so many people. We were creating business for so many people. I mean, because if somebody's, if you came to me and said, I'd like to meet these 37 people on your list, and all of a sudden over the course of, 10 weeks, you're getting 2 or 3 intros, a week, like you also feel an obligation to return the favor and make introductions for me. And that's why we've never had to make a cold call. Is everybody in our network is doing our marketing for us, as I am doing their marketing for them. Mm-hmm. So would I say it's completely altruistic? No, but there's a nice synergy and there's a nice harmony. Everybody is benefiting. And when those introductions are made in such a, in a warm and sincere way, there's just an inherent level of trust that, that goes with that introduction, and people are willing to take that next coffee, and that list keeps on building. And, they right. tell 2 friends and they tell 2 friends and they tell 2 friends. And it's a really amazing way of doing business development. So, I'm really proud to say we've never made a cold call in 8 years.
Love it. I love it. The give back first.
Yeah.
Elizabeth, do you have any final question that you'd like to ask Eric?
Yeah. I think you have a lot more to say, and it sounds like you have a lot of information you'd be willing to offer or share with others. So tell people how to get in touch with you if they've got questions about your networking method. I know you do some speaking and presentations on that. Somebody would like to hear more or get in touch. What is the best way to reach you?
Sure. Best way to reach me is my email, which is Eric, ERIC, .Lazar, LAZAR, at SpeedPro, SPEEDPRO.com.
Perfect. Well, we will have that on our website. If you're interested, you can go to pillarsoffranchising.com also and click on Eric's show post and learn more about him and find all of that information there. Eric, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a really interesting conversation. You've got a lot to offer.
Thank you very much.
And good luck. Good luck.
Yeah, good luck. We want to report back.
I will let you know. We will be shouting it from the rooftops if we win.
I bet you will be. Yeah. And you know what? Congratulations just on being nominated. That's an honor.
Yes.
Really appreciate it.
And send us a note. We'll send out a message on all of our platforms. So
absolutely.
Wonderful. Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Eric.
Hey, franchise owners. How's your local marketing? Do you feel like you could use some help keeping up with your social media posts and comments and reviews? Do you wonder if you could be doing more to attract local customers? Are you able to identify new move-ins to your local area? At Westvine, we help franchisees like you reach more local customers through digital marketing. With daily monitoring, creative content, and ad placement, and customer data intelligence, we'll get your business in front of the people who want your products or services. We also work with franchisors who need an agency to handle the digital marketing for all of their locations. If you're ready to reach more local customers, give us a call at 805-265-5440 or visit us at westvine.com. That's 805-265-5440 or westvine.com.
Laura, how are you today?
I'm doing so well, Jerry. How about you?
I'm doing outstanding. I got to tell you, that segment with Eric was phenomenal, wasn't it?
I know, it's very inspirational. I love his stories and all of his, thoughts for new franchisee candidates.
Yeah, and I made like a page of notes that I'll be talking about in my section. So I'm excited, but that's not what I'm here for. I'm here to kick off your segment. So, you always bring such a great piece to what we do here at Pillars of Franchising, both from the legal side and just a kind of an outsider looking in, I guess. So what are we going to talk about today, Laura?
Well, I think we're going to talk a little bit about franchisee associations, and Eric touched on it, franchise advisory councils. We're going to touch a little bit on those two and some of the nuances to keep in mind when you hear that the franchise you're looking at has one or both.
Well, they're kind of two different things. I'm on the International Franchise Association, which is the largest franchise related association around. I'm also on the executive committee, the executive franchise committee for Great Clips. And of course, my other brand, I'm not on that, but I have a lot of involvement with it. So you're absolutely right. As a franchisee, understanding what those different things mean, what they stand for, how you can become involved, maybe even how they protect you and help you grow, your part of the world is very important.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we dive in, for franchisee associations, when I talk to my clients about these, I kind of compare the associations to sort of like a little union. They really are meant to be an independent organization of franchisees. Usually the franchisees themselves are the ones that create it. Membership is completely voluntary, right? Just like a union, you don't have to join. And the associations usually are really involved to try and push the franchisor for things that they think would be beneficial, both for franchisees as well as, for just the growth of the system for customers. And so, we see things like, they will suggest different marketing campaigns. They will want to push for different changes. And sometimes they do a really good job of negotiating on behalf of all the franchisees. They can be very strong.
Again, the elected or named positions on franchisee boards or whatever you want to call it that are a part of the franchisors segment, they're very strong and they do a great job. And what you're talking about is a little bit different than that with the associations, and they come about it differently. And there's a lot of power that goes with that, but with a lot of power also goes some responsibility, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And you want to make sure that, if you're in a franchise and somebody's thinking about doing an association, you really need to make sure that you understand, what are the goals, right? Because it's not just, we're going to stand up for ourselves. That's not a clear goal. It's a little too broad.
Well, so, and I'm interested to hear your take on this because I've heard some stories about some franchisors who have some things expressly spoken out in their FDDs that talk about perhaps not having an association or how they would deal with an association. So I'm sure with your experience, You've got some comments about that.
Yeah, and some franchisors will, there can be different associations in very large franchise systems. right? If there are many, many, thousands of franchisees, there might be different groups, right? Who represent different people, different owners who have different interests, different goals. And the franchisor, they have the right to interact with them or to ignore them. And so, you really do want to go in with a collaborative approach, not a argumentative, blaming approach. And, that's kind of where people get the difference, or, I guess the difference really between the associations and the franchisee advisory councils, FACs for short, FACS. Those can, sometimes seem similar, right? Because what a FAC is, by comparison, is that it's usually a group that is appointed by the franchisor. Usually these are going to be, some of the strongest franchisees in the system, right? They're going to be those top 10, like Eric was mentioning in his system, or they're going to be, people from different parts of the country, depending on what kind of input the franchisor is looking to get. And because it is organized by the franchisor, those are groups that, they meet when the franchisor calls them to meet. They give advice on what they're asked to give advice about. It's not usually something where they come up with the topics, right? Although sometimes they might have thoughts to share. And so it's a little bit more top down from the franchisor. But both of them need to work collaboratively, because otherwise the franchisor, their staff, their executive staff is just going to probably ignore it if they're just there to be argumentative, be litigious. It's a double-edged sword.
Well, you touched on it, and you're 100% right. And it doesn't make any difference whether it's a FAC or an association, because either one of those can go the wrong direction and create a little bit of animosity with the franchisor.
Mm-hmm.
So franchisees need to understand that, again, there's responsibility that goes with either one of those positions. And you do have to work collaboratively with them, because if they do start ignoring you, you lose all authority with them, and you simply can't do your job. There's nowhere to go from there.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So that's some of it, but I really encourage franchisees, when they're in the stage of reviewing, the FDD itself, it does have a requirement to disclose if they have associations or if they have advisory councils. And those, if you're looking at buying into a large system where those exist, those can be a really good source of information, right? If you're doing, verification calls to make sure that you love the franchise before you buy in, if you don't feel like you're getting enough input, or you're getting enough calls back potentially from individual franchisees that you call, definitely reach out to the association or the FAC. I can almost assure you that they will get back to you.
Well, yeah. And again, tying your conversation to what Eric said, Eric did a coast to coast trip when he was deciding if he wanted to become involved, just so that he could touch base with those experienced, larger, successful franchisees. And you may be able to do some of that same thing. You don't have quite as much face to face, but if you just get a list of some of the people that serve on the FAC or in the association and contact them directly, because to your point, a lot of them are the larger, more successful ones. So depending on what direction you want to go with your franchisee life, whether you want one or two, one or two locations, or if you really want to grow to something larger, you may or may not want to get involved in that kind of stuff. So that's great information, Laura.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jerry.
You bet. So I think now we're going to go pay the bills, if I remember correctly, and then you and I'll be back on to talk about some other things.
What are the top 3 reasons that you should tune in to Pillars of Franchising? 1, franchise advice from the Million Dollar Mentoring Team. And 2, how about interviews from franchise professionals and influencers? And number 3, how about getting some professional tips on buying, growing, and exiting your franchise? Join us on Pillars of Franchising to learn about the secrets of franchising success. You can find us at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time, wherever you listen to your podcast.
Oh, I forgot. It's not Laura. It's the lovely Elizabeth working with me on this one.
Yeah, you got to spread the love around, Jerry, today.
Well, I know, but I'd have ended on a different note with Laura if I'd have remembered that. That's my bad. But I'm glad to see you. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. I just got to tell you, I was really, really excited to hear what Eric had to say. There's so many things that are in common with some of the things I've done in my franchise journey. Mm-hmm. And there are just some comments he made that make me feel a lot more comfortable because, when he talks about having a big personality, which actually got him, on the advisory board or the FAC or whichever it was, I think my family would agree that might be my position in life too. So.
Well, I think so. I think the commonality you and he have, and I think I have a little bit of it too, is that we're joiners and we like to, whether we like it or not, sometimes we end up in charge of things that we join. And not everybody is made that way, and that's okay. But I do think it's important to discuss the importance of joining things like this as a franchisee, especially because that's how you use the system that's built for you, right?
Yeah. And, part of what I'm going to talk about here today is just reinforcing and commenting on the things Eric said, because, we come from different backgrounds. We're in different brands. There's lots of differences, but there's also some commonality because, he wanted to be extremely successful from the beginning. That's what we wanted to do. So we went out of our way to spend time with some of the more successful franchisees, regardless of the size of their organization, because success can be defined a lot of different ways. You may have, one location, but it performs at a much higher level than a lot of the other people in the system. So I would argue you should spend time with that franchisee. If you want to be a very large organization, spending time with franchisees that have grown their group is a good way to learn from them and so on. So I really want to reinforce what Eric said about that. From my standpoint as a franchisee, you need to decide that early in your franchise career because, going to events that are put on by your franchisor and spending time not only in organized opportunities with your peers, but also going out of your way, as he did, to tour the country and talk to successful franchisees. As many of you will remember, a couple of years ago, my wife and I, in the midst of COVID, did a coast-to-coast tour to touch base with a lot of franchisees and, let them know it was going to be okay. And, they hadn't lost their relationships and so on. And we're still feeling the reverberations of those visits, 2 years later. So I think Eric touched on some amazing things there. I really like what he's built there and how far he's gone. And I think he is a success story that many franchisees or potential franchisees that are listening may want to take some extra notes and may even reach out to him.
Yeah, I think so too. I think he'd be a great resource, as are you for many. I think mentorship is in your blood as well. And in terms of, we always talk about franchising, you're not in a silo, right? You're in business for yourself and not by yourself. So one of the things these associations do is reiterate that, and it gets you in a community of people who are doing the same thing as you. But also it gives voice, because there's an amplification of voice and numbers and groups. So what is the importance, because you have been heavily involved in the IFA on the board and in various roles, what do you think benefit, if I'm a new franchisee coming into a system, what is the benefit of me for being involved in some of those things in my overarching experience as a franchisee? Sure.
Well, we'll talk about IFA specifically, education. So especially emerging brands, sometimes they don't have a lot of time and experience where you're going to have a large group of experienced and successful franchisees. So you as a potential new franchisee may not be able to get a ton of best practices from them. The franchisor, if it's an emerging brand, may not have built up as much infrastructure yet. So you're still maybe not getting as much information and support as you need. But when you go to IFA, you're hanging out with hundreds of experienced franchisees from different brands that, may not be specific to what you're doing with your brand, but their best practices may quite well adapt to what you're doing. So I would say that's the number one thing, the connections you get, the support you get from, fellow franchisees and so on. I think one of them that's forgotten quite often is having a voice on Capitol Hill. As a franchisee from your state, your representatives want to talk to you. They want to hear from you. And you really want to reach out to them and talk to them about, maybe some things going on in DC that will impact your business, your employees, and so on. And so IFA takes that on and handles all the responsibility of setting that up and getting you in touch with people. And, I think just serving with other people and as we talked about with Eric, the leadership component that goes with it. When I joined IFA, I had no intention of being on the board or serving as the moderator of the franchisee forum, but it's necessary. We need franchisees to take on a little bit of that. You're hanging out with other very successful franchisees that have maybe gone before you to lead that. And you kind of want to put your stamp on it, your thumbprint, if you will, a little bit. And we all have different ideas about how we can best support other franchisees. And this is it's an amazing opportunity for you to actually put that into action. So those are probably the big three. There's certainly a lot of other opportunities. They've got specific educational paths for franchisees, so you can learn a ton about franchising overall. But that's IFA. And I totally think people should get into that. The FACs that the existing brands have, where you can be involved either as a member of the FAC or just, talking to your FAC representative about issues going on in your specific business that maybe the franchisor hasn't talked about or thought about, or maybe you've got a best practice that would help all the other franchisees and you can pass it upstream through that. So I think there's power in being involved in the FAC for your franchise brand at some level, and also kind of an overarching power and need to be involved in the IFA. So I think doing both of them is an ancillary piece of being a franchisee, and I think it's quite powerful.
So if you're if you're communicating with your FAC, for those who are brand new, do they have the ear of the franchisor? Do they make impact and help with change and pass those best practices up? Is that relationship going both directions?
Yeah, that's a great question. First off, every FAC works a little differently, but by and large, they have at least quarterly meetings and maybe monthly meetings as a group. Generally, there will be some corporate people listening in to some of those meetings or maybe even engaging in the meetings. And what the corporate group wants to hear is what you're hearing from the franchisees that are talking to you in your region or your area or whatever the case might be. So yes, somebody with one unit in a very small town somewhere, if they've discovered something that will really help, they can pass it up line through those, and they do listen. Now, what many franchisees forget is the franchisor has some goals too, that they hope to have franchisees help them reach. And you may or may not see the changes that you want, but you still need to continue to pass that upstream, or you're never going to know if it's going to make a difference. So yes, they do listen. Many groups and many FACs will have meetings with just the FAC members, maybe interspersed amongst the ones that corporate is involved in, so that they can do some brainstorming kind of behind the scenes to have a united front when they present to the franchisor. But both of those are very powerful, and I would suggest everybody gets involved in it.
So final question for you, Jerry. How have you seen your personal brand and your businesses benefit from your participation in these kinds of associations?
That was one of the things I wanted to call out here. I made a note where Eric talked about building the Eric brand. And, we in our different markets have built our own brand that is headed by Great Clips or the Joint Chiropractic, but yet every franchisee has to follow the franchisor's guidelines. But many times you can put some added spin to it. You can put your own mark on some things and so on. So, we want to do it better than everybody else. We want to do it better than the competition. But if we're sharing a market with other franchisees, we kind of want to do it better than them too. And you could look at that a couple different ways, either to be a leader, so hopefully they follow and improve what they're doing, but also from a competitive standpoint, you simply just want to be the best. So building your own brand under the brand that you represent, I think, is quite powerful. We do, and again, these are all suggestions for franchisees and co-ops and markets. Supporting nonprofits is a very powerful way to get marketing done for almost no cost, in some cases free, and do some good things in your community and kind of set yourself apart from your competition in that doing the right things at the right times. So that's part of adding to your brand. We got our family involved, and having a family first atmosphere in your franchise system is very powerful. So, and I will tell you again, back to your original question, if I'm going to talk about IFA and the opportunities to learn from your peers, I have taken so much from those meetings that I've taken back and talked about with my family, and some of those get incorporated to what we do as we continue to grow. And so the cost of being involved in those associations and going to events and things like that may seem, a little high for somebody that's got 1 or 2 units. But if you look at the return on investment and taking one idea and coming back and incorporating it, you might spend $5,000 to go to one of these events and come back and in the first year get $50,000 worth of return on that one idea you brought back. So I would suggest they not be short-sighted and start looking at the bigger picture and so on. So that's what's gone on with us. And I can only say we're going to continue to grow our involvement in IFA and certainly our FAC groups that we're responsible or we report to, because it is a powerful way for us to continue to grow our personal brand.
So Jerry, since you are such a wealth of information on this topic and you have done so much work in this area, how would people reach you if they wanted to get a little more plugged in and were looking to get some advice and pointed in the right direction?
Oh, great question. Thank you very much for asking that. Well, first off, they can go to Pillars of Franchising, because I'm pretty sure they can reach me through the Pillars of Franchising website. So that would be my number one suggestion. But also you can email me, jerry.akers, that's AKERS, @greatclips.net. And I get approached to do a lot of consulting and coaching, and I share my ideas freely. So certainly anybody can reach out to me and I'll help them any way I can. And I got just a couple quick comments about Eric, and then we'll continue on roll off of this thing. I had a couple things that he said that really resonated with me. Again, part of IFA and so on. Service members are going to be great franchisees in most cases because they're used to following systems. Franchising is a system. I dearly love working with retired service members in getting into franchising and expanding on the brand. So I want to reinforce that for our listening world in case they missed it when Eric said it. I really appreciated a comment he made, and I use this with franchisees when I coach them, and I want our audience to hear this again. And it's hard for us to admit this, so I want to commend Eric for bringing it up, and I will also say I've done it, so it's not just him. When you're built like we are, you can get too aggressive in your growth process, and you can get over your skis is an old term, right? You can get ahead of yourself, and you can build units too quickly to where the first units are not cash flowing yet, maybe, and then you just dig deeper and deeper, and before long, your finances are a little bit upside down because you're supporting so many new, units because they haven't got to break even yet. And it's pretty easy to get into that situation when you get excited and you start negotiating leases, and you've got somebody in your ear chirping about continuing to grow, and it's built into your DNA to grow. So I really want our listeners to understand I am a huge proponent of quick growth, but we do have to have some brakes on that process. We have to recognize where the shortfalls of that process are and make sure that we take it into account when we're making our plans and implementing. So kudos to Eric for calling that out. I admitted we've done it too a couple times, and you learn from your experiences. And what Eric and I do, I'm sure I can speak for Eric, we pass that along to other franchisees so they don't make the same mistakes. So those are the two things I wanted to call out. And I'll tell you, this has been a great section, a great segment, a great show, and I appreciate being a part of it. So thanks a lot, Elizabeth.
Well, and thank you for the good advice as usual, Jerry. We will see you next week. As usual, thank you for joining Pillars of Franchising. We appreciate every single one of you. We want to give a shout out to our sponsors, the Titus Center for Franchising at Palm Beach Atlantic University. You can find them on the college's website. Also, Franchise Show 247, which can be found at franchiseshow247.com. We couldn't do without our sponsors, and we appreciate their support. don't forget, we'd love to have call-in guests. Our number to call in is 323-580-5755. That is 323-580-5755. If you have questions for our guests or for any of our $1 Million mentors, we welcome you to call in at any time on the show. We will do our very best to answer your calls. Stay tuned. More coming up. All right. Thank you for joining us on the show today. And thank you to our guest, Eric Lazar of SpeedPro. As always, we appreciate our $1 Million mentor, Jerry Akers, Dale Carnegie's Karen Kimsey-Sward, and Laura Liss, our franchising attorney. I am Elizabeth Denham with producer Fred McMurray. Together, we are your resource for franchising success. This has been Pillars of Franchising, and the dream starts here.